Just taking a stroll with Spider-Cat. Here's your look at the new Hot Toys video game masterpiece, the Miles Morales 1/6 scale collectible figure. Teenager Miles Morales is adjusting to his new home while following the footsteps of his mentor Peter Parker as the new Spider-Man. But when a fierce power struggle threatens to destroy his new home, the aspiring hero realizes that with great power there must also come great responsibility. Celebrating the grand release of Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, Hot Toys is transforming Miles Morales and his incredibly cool Spidey suit into the latest 6-scale collectible figure, topping up with some stylish knits for an additional suit look to stay warm and chic. Figure before we get a closer look at Miles Morales, let's first figure out how tall the figure stands. I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to put it right to the very top of his head, and the figure seems to stand at 12 inches in height, or about 30.5 centimeters tall. Display stand wise, the figure comes included with the same hexagonal display stand that we have seen treated to other Hot Toys Spider-Man figures in the past. Although the deco is slightly different, as you can see, brought in some really nice crimson red, as well as the familiar Spider-Man logo that would go along with Miles Morales' costume. Speaking of Miles Morales, scriptured down below, just below the Spider-Man logo, there's the character's name. And in case you missed it, the character's name is also printed in a different font on the front here, though not on a placard. It seems really like Hot Toys have gone away from using the placards. Personally speaking, I always found like the placards were a little harder to make out the character's name. First of all, it was a lot smaller, and usually if you had a light source hitting it, it would be hard to make out the etched-in name. I find printing in the name nice and bright, white, bold font. It's a lot easier to see the character's name when you have it on shelf. The display stand does have the adjustable neck, which of course runs all the way up to the top to give you a waist clip, which is something that can open and close and clasp around the character's waist. So if you wanted to, first of all, if you want to just put in a regular museum pose, you can certainly do that. But you can also lift up that waist clip if you want to have the character more in a flight pose. Of course, mileage may vary. These Spider-Man Hot Toys figures are never superposable to start off with. Any bit of posability that you put in the character usually is things that you only can do temporarily, because of the risk that it could leave permanent creases in the costumes, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Suppose before we talk costume, let's actually talk about the figure's accessories, because there's quite a lot to cover off here that come included with Miles Morales, and it's really hard to kind of even gauge where to start. Maybe what we'll do is we'll start with the more samesies that have come included with other Spider-Man. We'll just kind of quickly go through that. The samesies department, the figure comes included with the same tray of different webbing. Yes, it's the same tray of webbing that we've gotten with every other Spider-Man, which is, again, fine. I mean, I don't expect them to change the webbing every single time, and it does the job. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the webbing that comes included with the figure, you get a couple of straight strands, and all the strands, by the way, are done in a clear plastic, nicely sculpted, but nothing new brought to the table. There's also a more hook line that attaches to the figure's hands. We'll talk more about that in a second. And what I would consider the Q-tip webs. Those are still presently found with this Spider-Man release as well. Again, all utilizing translucent clear plastic. Nothing new to report, but again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. One of my favorite webs always seems to be, and I mention this every single time we have a look at these Spider-Man, is this web right here. Kind of gives you an excess amount of wound up webbing that can go around his hands. So like, for example, if you took one of the fist hands that have the holes in it, you can run the webbing. Does it feel like we're doing this like we've already done this before? It probably is the case. You can have the webbing, the excess webbing, run through his hand like that. It's one of my favorite go-to webbings that come include these 6-scale figures of Spider-Man. And then, of course, if you guys are familiar with these Spider-Man figures by now, the other thing that we're going to talk about is a little funnel webbing. If you want to have the figure maybe dangling down in your D-Tolf, that's a lot of Ds, you can actually have this looking as if it's attached to the top and he's sort of just pulling himself down on the single thread of spider webbing. Again, not much new is here. I mean, this is all stuff that we've gotten before, but still appreciate the fact that Hot Toys continues to throw in webbing. Every once in a while, it would be nice if they just sprinkled in there something different from time to time. But again, if the webbing works with the characters, and I've seen lots of people do some real creative ways to pose the figures using those same web lines that we've got with every single release. Again, I don't feel like necessarily Hot Toys has to change it. Just every once in a while, throw something different in there so you can be surprised when you pull out the webbing for a change. And of course, you get hands. Lots and lots of hands. I'm going to start first with these hands here, being that these were the hands we already showed off. These were the ones that have the holes straight through them, so you can certainly take a spider web of any size, or at least the ones that come included with the figures, and you can slide them into those holes. The figure also comes included with a bunch of closed fists, which really aren't that much different than the hands we just finished having a look at, other than the fact that these are without holes, sans le holes. But the hands are nicely sculpted, as well, equally painted too. Sort of this raspberry red that they ended up going with works not only just with the hands that come included with the figures, but also his costume that we'll talk more about in a second. The figure also comes included with a couple of wall-crawling hands. Again, if you'd like to be that kind of person that puts your characters in really dynamic poses and then posts on social media and everybody says, wow, man, you are just like the best poser around. That's really a compliment. Normally would not have been the case. But yeah, you can be the person that puts your figures looking as if they're scaling up the side of your detail or shelf space. You got yourself some wall-crawling hands. Again, nice coloring used here, as well as the texturing that they put on the inside of the gloves. Really nice work on Hot Toys' part. And then, of course, no Spider-Man would be complete without web-shooting hands, and he comes included with those as well. The thing about these web-shooting hands is that they are also detachable. Not the sense that you detach them from the forearms, but rather instead, I don't know if you can see, there's a line right here. Can you see it? It's right there. Right there. Okay, probably helps if I do this. Go ahead and just detach the top part of the hand. Be careful, of course, that you're not going to lose these. And you can remove this top part. And you can see left behind are holes. Then, to come included with the figure, I'm just going to go grab it off to the side here. The figure comes included with web shooters. And the web shooters basically just replace that part of the glove. And they just plug into place like that. And then you can then take the web lines, any one of them which we've just finished having a look at. So let's take, for example, the straight line web. And that fits then just into the hole. And it actually looks like Miles Morales is shooting off his web. Still, though, I wish that this wasn't a piece that had to go on top of an existing glove. Just because if you lose this part, then you're really null and void when it comes to be able to display him with shooting out webs. I mean, the web shooters are already attached to his forearms. I'll show you guys that in a second. But if you want the ones that shoot the webs out, these are the only things that you can really use for it. I really don't like the idea of just losing those and all of a sudden you're just crap out of luck. You really can't then display the figure with them. The figure will also come included with these energy effects. This can clip over top of his existing torso. I'll show you guys that in a second. And then he also has ones that clip onto his forearms. Not so much even clip as much as just sliding up the forearms. To do that, grab the figure here. And we're just going to grab the hand and remove it because you have to remove it from the forearm. While you are doing it, though, just be careful of these web shooters. These are the web shooters that are attached to the forearms as of right now. And if you're not careful, can run the risk of being lost. Then take the energy effect and slide it over top of his forearm. And then quickly replace then the hand. And then you've got the energy electricity effect there on his one forearm. You can rinse and repeat the steps. Just remove the hand. And then when you're sliding it in place, you're going to take like the more fiery end of it, which is up here. You want that further up on his forearm. And then you basically just run the forearm straight through the hole. Looks like something from Star Trek. Go ahead, once again, and just slide the forearm straight through. I find this one's a little harder to kind of line everything up, but slide it up the forearm as best you can get it, and then go ahead and then replace the hands. Like that. You really don't even necessarily need to do it with the head where you have to remove it. It will make things a little bit more easier, but you can really fit it over top of his forehead. But let's go ahead and just take the head off. There we go. And just basically then take this, make sure you have it facing the right way. And then that fits over top of his existing... You know what? I had it the right way the first time. Slide it over top of his torso like that. And then go ahead from there and put the head back in place. And it looks good. I mean, it gives you something a little bit differently when it comes to displaying Miles Morales. My only real concern, though, and it isn't so much on the forearms. I don't think the forearms are going to be so much hazard worrying about. But I worry about this part of his torso. I mean, this is, yes, soft plastic. It's fairly soft plastic, and it's translucent plastic. I wonder if you continue to run this across his chest emblem, if that's going to start developing scratches or even maybe flake off the paint. I'm not personally going to have this issue because other than the accessories I'm just showing you right now in this review, this is the last time I'm going to display this on the figure. I think there's just other better things to be displayed with Miles Morales, or even just display him stock without them. It's nice that they included it, but again, I don't know long term. You just continue to put this over top of his torso, whether that's going to even cut into the material that they've used. Because the material in these Spider-Man figures are always something that you really have to worry about. At least I worry. Maybe I spend too much time worrying about. But he does have the electricity attachments. They're there if you want to use them for your figure. Packaged also with Miles, Hot Toys includes different lenses that you can replace out with the figure's head sculpt. There's these ones, which are the biggest of the three that are swappable out. And I'll show you slightly smaller closed lens right there. And then the smallest of the three, because you get 3 sets of them, is this one right here. We have gotten this with tons of Spider-Man in the past. Although slightly different, of course, the outside of the lens is painted nicely in this crimson red. To swap out those on the figure's head sculpt, just simply grab the figure. You gotta really be careful too. All you really do is put a little bit of pressure in the top corner. That's all you really need to do. If you're careless, you can easily sink in the socket of the eye, but all you really have to do is just push the corner of the eye and peel it back like that, all of which are attached by magnets, you can see right there. And just to take the smallest of the 3, so you can see the difference between the 2, to put the new one in, you're just lining it up to the hole and then easily putting the lens back in place. This is the smallest, this is the largest, and then yeah, there's varying degrees of sizes in between. So you really can customize this. You can have both lenses working the same way together as a pair, or you can mix things up a little bit. You can have one eye slightly closed, one eye slightly open, sort of giving them that more surprised wink or shock look on his face. This is really fun. Miles Morales also comes included with his backpack, or here in Canada we usually call these knapsacks, which had a lot of you viewers really scratching your heads. Yes, we call them sometimes knapsacks. But the backpack is nicely not only detailed and painted, but it does also have a swappable flap. As you can see right now, it's only just partially open, not enough to really get anything in there or store any accessories. But what you can do is they also included this smaller version, sort of where the backpack has been zipped down. To change that out, all you have to do is get your finger inside the zipper and you detach the bottom part of it. I'm going to do it from the one side. There's the hole right there. And then detach it from the other side. It literally is just these plugs that actually fit into those open holes. And then from there, you can decrease the size and therefore open up the top of the backpack to store or house accessories inside. What could one house inside of a backpack this size? How about like a character like Spider-Cat? Yes, Hot Toys does include Spider-Cat as one of the accessories that come along with Miles Morales. As it stands, certainly right now, it looks like the kitty is just hanging around. It kind of reminds me of that 80s poster where the cat is hanging in there and it just says, hang in there. Who else had that poster growing up? I didn't, but I had a friend that had the hang in there kitty. Poor kitty. Anyways, though, it does look like the kitty is just either looking up, looking for something to eat for dinner, or it looks like it's hanging from like a fishing line or like a laundry line. But what you can do is you can take Spider-Cat and just slide it down. There's not much space to really work with, and they actually did put in a couple little foam pieces actually to help just keep Spider-Cat from falling around inside the backpack. But you can easily slide down the little kitty there, so actually his little paws are sticking out the top of the flap. That's so cool. Even if I just don't decide to display him with anything else, he's definitely going to be displayed with the backpack on his back. And how does one attach the backpack to his back, you may ask? Well, all you have to do is detach the bottom of the straps and then just drape this over his shoulders, which we'll do in a second. But there are other things, of course, that we want to have a look at as well. The figure comes included with earmuffs. I've never owned a pair of earmuffs like this, where they literally just clamp onto the side of the ears. And then this goes around to the back of the character's head, for example. It's nicely meshed and painted well in white, with the interior of it done in a darker gray. He also comes included with a hat. Or sometimes here in Canada, we also call these toques. You're learning a whole new thing about Canadians here. The toque is a material, so of course that fits well over top of his head. The character also comes included with a scarf. The figure also comes included with leg warmers. The leg warmers of all the things that we just finished having a look at right now were the hardest of things to put onto them. You're sliding on literally tiny little 6-scale socks. And what you really don't want to do is resist the urge of taking off the feet. The feet are something you may want to just keep onto the legs. And all you really then do is take then the leg warmers, and it's like dressing a small child. Just feed it up the feet. And once you get it over top of the toe, just grab the back of the leg warmer and slide it up his leg. This may be the only time I think we've ever done leg warmers on a figure before. Slide it as far up the leg as you can get it, and then from there do the exact same thing on the other side. Feeding it over top of the feet, and then grabbing the back of it and just pulling it up the heel. While the whole time I was doing this, I wasn't really worried that I was putting pressure on the feet themselves. Very easily, actually. Once you get it, of course, past this point, it's easier. It's a little harder once you get it over the toes the first couple of times. But after that, just feed it up the legs like that. Just get it as high up the leg as you really want it. You can have it further up if you want, but I'm just going to kind of leave it there. And he's got himself some leg warmers. Let's go ahead and get the scarf on there. We're going to have to remove the head to do that. And then take the scarf and just sort of just drape the scarf over top of his costume. Put the head back in place. And maybe what we'll do as well is we'll put the backpack on next. Now, we've already detached the straps, so the straps just feed. Oops. He's not carrying it like a child. Feed it around to the back, bring around the straps, and then just attach the straps again to those open slots on the back of the backpack or knapsack. I can't tell you how many times I've said knapsack in previous reviews, and somebody says, what is a knapsack? Well, that's what we call backpacks here also in Canada. Just attach the straps on both the sides, and not only is the backpack in place, but also you've got Spider Kitty on the back there being carried around. It's best advised to probably put on the backpack once you put on the scarf. I guess you could really reverse the steps and then just put the scarf over top. It's entirely up to you. You know what, in fact, having now said that, just take that off, put the scarf over top. I'm just trying to think of, if I was a 6-scale figure, which thank goodness I'm not, I probably would be the type to put the scarf on after putting on the backpack. You can then take the earmuffs. And the earmuffs are pretty simple. You're just basically feeding them from the back of the head. And then line up where you would gauge the ears roughly to be on Miles Morales. I'm going to guess that they're probably right around there. And then from there, just finish things off with the hat or toque. Just put over top of his head. And you got yourself quite the warm-looking Miles Morales, and equally so, I have to say, probably quite a warm Spider Kitty inside. The only thing about the toque is that with the earmuffs in the way, it's a little harder to get it further down on his head. You may even find it's easier to take the earmuffs off first, put the toque on, and then once the toque's in place, that's so much better. That's so much better. Then put the earmuffs in place. And that's definitely a much more warmer Miles Morales. He doesn't have a jacket, but at least he can still carry around his costume. He can wear his costume on his body. He's got himself his scarf. He's got himself his backpack. And he also has tucked inside in the back, hang in there, kitty, his little tiny adorable spider cat. Dressing back down Miles Morales so we can get a closer look at his Spider-Man suit now. We'll start first with his head sculpt. Once again, Hot Toys going back to the tried and true method of using a molded plastic head and then somewhat closely resembling that same color scheme with his suit. It always seems to be the case that the head always looks like it's a different color than the rest of the costume, and unfortunately it's still the case here with Miles Morales. The head sculpt is close enough in color of the black to what we get here for the rest of the suit, but you can clearly see, like, his head is clearly a darker color of the black. I wish that they could have made the color of the suit just a little shade darker so it would have been closely resembling the head sculpt, because it does look like it's two different materials that they ended up using. Despite that, though, it's actually a nice looking suit. Again, looking closely, you can see the texturing that they've done to the actual head itself with nice raised webbing. And the webbing itself matches the rest of the coloring of the suit. So the webbing is not too bad. It's just the fact that the black in the head isn't quite the same black that they use for the rest of the suit. It's close, but it's no cigar. As for the actual lenses of the eyes, we looked at them certainly earlier when we changed out the eyes, but I can't help but notice like there's a darker, slightly darker shade outside the outer parameter of the lens of the eye, with more of a whiter lens on the inside. It's a really nice contrast of the two colors. Other than the fact, like, clearly the head sculpt isn't going to be matching the rest of the body. It's pretty close. It's close, but it's not quite there. the look of the actual suit is very sharp. Not sharp, certainly, just not literally, figuratively sharp. You've got the raised webbing here on the actual suit itself, some nice texturing done to the actual black portion of the suit. And even the smoother portions, like, for example, the crimson red here, this raspberry red that they've used. If you can see up close like this, and I'm hoping I can do the job well, you can see that there's almost like this triangular texturing or pattern work that they've printed onto the actual red portions of the suit. It's something far enough away that you're really not going to be able to see, but up close, it's really those little attentions of detail I really appreciate that Hot Toys does. The suit itself is primarily all black, other than just the areas we've already looked at here, the top shoulder section, and a few little bit of red that's actually in the fingerless gloves that he's wearing, although they're not quite fingerless gloves. Even the parts that are just simply black, texturing has been nicely added to the actual suit itself, where the smoother sections of the black, though don't have texturing, at least is a different contrast of black. Of course, the suit itself is pretty tight. There is articulation on the figure, but the articulation generally on Spider-Man figures is pretty limited. Even though it does advertise that these figures are superposable, and you always see images online of these Hot Toys Spider-Man figures in some quite creative-looking poses. In actual fact, you really never can get them in those proper poses. I'm going to spin this around to the back so you can see it on the back there. Larger emblem presented on the back of Miles Morales' torso. And again, looking at it really close, you can see, once again, those little diamond patterns that they have actually printed onto the suit. Now, I would imagine they've sewn this all in, although I don't have any real issues with this coming off the suit. There's always that one section of the suit. You can see there's a seam line down the one side of his torso. There's always one seam that's cleaner than the other. This is the finished seam, and then there's always the more rougher looking seam that this is the part that they sew over top of the figure. So like, for example, they would have had to slide the figure into the finished side of the suit and then basically just sew up the rest of it. So there's always that one side that's slightly coarser and slightly rougher than the other. This just happens to be Miles Morales' side right here. A little bit further down on the figure, again, a lot of real black, but again, like, the texturing adds a little bit more something to it, so it's not simply just a smooth black costume that we're looking at. His feet are separate pieces, even though I didn't remove it when we did put on the leg warmers. They are separate, so of course when it comes to the articulation on the figure that we'll look at in a second, you do actually get quite a bit of a range of motion. Not as much ankle pivot happening here, but you certainly can move the feet up and down. They're slightly on the squeakier side. For the figure's articulation, let's have a look at that right now, and we'll start first with his head sculpt. One good thing, at least, of using a plastic head is it doesn't limit any bit of the articulation when it comes to moving the head up, down, back and forth. And again, you can rotate all the way around. While you are rotating it, just be careful you don't put pressure against the eye. You may have already seen me do it. Putting pressure against the eye while you are moving the head may result in the eye falling off. And you don't realize it until later. As for the arms do come out almost at a 90-degree angle bend. And you may probably already hear it as I'm moving out the arms. They click. There seems to be ratcheted joints working behind the scenes. You bring the arms forward, but not by much, though, because, of course, you're going to see like the material is going to start leaving wrinkles. Most of my Spider-Man figures, sadly, I have to usually put in museum poses because I run the risk anything outside of that. If I put them in like creative-looking poses, I have had Spider-Man figures in the past that have started developing like crease marks across the fabric. And especially this type of material, I really don't want to have these start to split on me over time. He does have a bicep swivel. Despite the fact that you can't really see it, he does have a bicep swivel. Figure has a double hinge on the elbow, and he also has a swivel in the hand, so you can rotate those all the way around. The upper torso on Miles Morales seems to be on a ball joint. And by the way as well, drawing your attention to underneath the suit, it doesn't seem like they even just padded the suit to give him extra muscles. Like, there's a little bit of padding, but I feel like there is actually some musculature underneath that. You can kind of feel it lower on his lower abdomen area. But yeah, the figure does have an upper torso ball joint. You can rotate that all the way around. The figure does have a splits that does rely on ratcheted joints once again. It's always so disheartening hearing this kind of sound happening from a 6-scale figure because you always feel like you're breaking something underneath. The leg goes forward only by about 45 degrees. And you can also bring, again, the legs back at about 45 degrees. You can bend the knee at a double hinge joint. And as we already discussed, the figure does have toe articulation or foot articulation. Thank goodness at least that the feet are separate pieces. And they've done, actually, I feel, a better job of closely resembling the coloring of the black of the feet to match the coloring of the costume. I wish I could say the same for actually his head sculpt, which again, the head sculpt is way too dark, I feel, too dark of a shade to match the rest of his body. Miles Morales is a nice looking figure. If you are a big fan of collecting the Hot Toys figures, especially the ones tied into the Spider-Man video game universe, Miles Morales is a nice pickup. He does have certainly enough things going for him, different ways of displaying the figure. You can attach those electricity effects. Personally, I'm going to just leave those off, I think, in favor of dressing him up in his toque here in Canada, his scarf, his backpack, and then have him carrying around Spider-Cat, because Spider-Cat's too cute of an accessory, I think, to leave off the figure. Miles Morales may be up there with Spider-Man 2099 as my favorite suit that Hot Toys has done so far from the video game Masterpiece line. His colors are pretty simplistic, generally an all midnight black suit with some really sharp red accents, but I do like the simplicity of his suit. Even the areas that really are black, as you saw in this review, are nicely textured, so you really feel like Hot Toys has put a lot of time and effort into creating the suit. The suit, like all other Spider-Man, of course, does have limitations, and even though I am displaying him in a more dynamic pose as of right now, long-term displaying him like this, I usually just resort to displaying my Spider-Man figures in museum poses, just because I don't want to develop wrinkles in their costumes. I've heard from some people that the wrinkles are things that go away, but with suits like Spider-Man being so tight to their bodies, I really don't want to, again, run the risk of those starting to develop creases, wrinkles, or at the very worst case, splits over time. Now, of course, he has lots of different ways of changing out the looks, different ways you can display the figure. You can, of course, attach the electricity effects to him. I'm not really too keen on the electricity myself. First of which, I think it looks too bulky on top of the figure. It's a nice effect to be able to include it, but I also worry that they may start splitting or rubbing against the paint on the costume if you continue to put them on and take them off and put them on. There's, of course, the option of displaying him with the scarf, the toque, the backpack, and the leg warmers. I may meet that somewhere in the middle, I think, for the time being, and just display him in his OG costume with maybe his backpack on his back, and inside the backpack, Spider Kitty. Hang in there, Spider Kitty. Hang in there. What do you guys think of the figure? Let me know down below in the comments section, whether you picked the figure up for yourself or based on this review and this review alone. What do you guys think of the new Spider-Man Miles Morales 1/6 scale collectible figure from the folks over at Hot Toys? And hey, now, if you are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content that you're seeing, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Turn on the bell notification so you get those friendly 411s of when new videos are going to be popping up. And just a friendly 411 from the person that's behind the camera. Hey, that's me. That's me. That's this guy. Friendly 411 that there are going to be more Hot Toys reviews coming your way, so make sure you're keeping your peepers peeled to this channel. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.